A common pain in the neck for first-time knitters are twisted stitches. The point of view which makes it most obvious will be from the right side of a piece of stockinette stitch. As you look at normal stitches with stockinette, you will see a V shape which is nice, smooth, and reasonably elastic. However, from time to time, you will come across one of these little guys. A very brief and simple explanation as to what causes this is knitting through the back loop. Actually, you can also get it twisted if you end up wrapping your yarn the wrong way. The truth? There is no right or wrong way of knitting. In fact, there is something referred to as knitting methods. Before we begin, let's discuss the anatomy of a stitch. Every stitch has a head with two legs and a stitch face. The head is the top of the loop, or upper crest, the same part when it was wrapped over the needle. The stitch face is the actual hole in which you will be inserting your needle. Faces can face either to the right or to the left. In general, knit's stitch faces will be towards you. Conversely, purl stitch faces will be facing away from you. Legs are the lower vertical portions of stitches that would have been either in the front or back of your work while it was resting on the needles. The legs are what are often referred to as loops, which are further differentiated as front loops and back loops. Front loops are those closest to you, whereas back loops are farther from you. That being said, what is important here is to know where your leading legs and trailing legs are. The leading leg immediately follows behind your feeding yarn. That is, the yarn that has yet to get incorporated into your piece of work. Usually we talk about knitting through the back loop, resulting in a twisted stitch, but that isn't always the case. Depending on the knitting method, the back loop could be either the leading leg or the trailing leg. Truth is, either leg can be a front loop or a back loop. The leading leg immediately follows behind your feeding yarn. That is, the yarn that has yet to get incorporated into your piece of work. Meanwhile, the trailing leg is the one immediately following behind it. Ultimately, it's going to depend on which leg that gets involved when we insert our needle that will result in the twisted stitches or untwisted stitches. With the exception of knitting in the round, twisted stitches will always occur whenever we knit through the trailing leg. If you're knitting in the round, it's knitting through the leading leg which will twist your stitches, which can be your front or back loop depending on your knitting methods. Now let's talk about knitting methods. Not to be confused with knitting styles. Knitting methods are defined by the actual construction of your stitches, including where you put your knitting needle into your stitches and how you are wrapping the yarn around the knitting needle. In contrast, a knitting style has more to do with which hand does what in regards to holding your yarn or needles when executing the stitches. There are three knitting methods: Western, Eastern, and combination. Western knitting is identified when your leading leg is the front loop. These stitches are created by wrapping the yarn over coming towards you. In this case, knitting through the back loop will end up twisting your stitches. Eastern knitting is performed by knitting through the back loop as your leading legs and bringing your yarn over and away from you. This will result in the leading leg being in the back and the trailing leg in the front. Contrary to what we are normally told, it's knitting in the front loop which will twist your stitches in this case. Combination knitting, as its name implies, is the result of combining portions of the previous two. When you have to insert your needle through the front loop, but you bring your yarn over the needle and away from you, or if you insert your needle through the back loop but bring the yarn over and towards you, are examples of combination knitting. So as long as you're not knitting in the round, knitting through the trailing leg will always result in twisted stitches. To help yourself find the trailing legs, just look at your stitches and which way the yarn was going. Essentially, the trailing leg will have formed farther back in the creation of your stitches. Whichever side came first when you brought the yarn over your needle will be the trailing leg, and knitting through this side is what will twist your stitches. Take for example, The row I've just knitted here was going from right to left. As a result, the trailing legs are going to be further towards the right. This would mean knitting through the side further towards the left will prevent your stitches from getting twisted. Before we end this session, I would like to disclose to you all that there's actually a benefit to twisted stitches in certain situations. Certain increases whose entire purpose is to remain virtually invisible will require you to twist your stitch. If you didn't, you would end up with a hole, one that is smaller than what occurs with a yarn over type of increase. Or perhaps you're searching for a more rigid, less flexible fabric than stockinette. Twisted stockinette could be your answer. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and stay tuned.